Right along, our next speaker is Rachael Petersen, and Rachael will provide an analysis of World Resources Institute's Global Forest Watch program. Rachael is the Impacts Manager of Global Forest Watch, a powerful near real-time forest monitoring system that unites technology and human networks to create never-before possible transparency on what is happening in forests around the world. She coordinates Global Forest Watch's 90-plus partners, including Goodall, Digital Globe, Planet, University of Maryland, Orbital Insight, and others to improve the state of the art of real-time forest monitoring and builds tools to deliver data to stakeholders on the front lines of forest management. Rachael holds a BA in Environmental Policy and Anthropology from Rice University.
Great, fantastic. Well, thank you all so much. As mentioned, my name is Rachael Petersen, and I work at the World Resources Institute here in Washington, D.C. WRI is a global environmental think tank with over 500 staff in the U.S., Brazil, India, China, Mexico, and Europe, as well as a new office in Ethiopia. So I'm really excited to be here today. And I'm very excited to talk about Global Forest Watch. Global Forest Watch is an online forest monitoring and alert system designed to empower people everywhere to make better decisions about forests. At Global Forest Watch, we believe that data, and in particular open data, is a critical but often lacking input in decision-making about forests at many scales, from the national level to the local level, to multinational corporations who are making purchasing decisions about commodities that drive deforestation. So today, I'll talk a little bit about the challenge that we're facing in terms of the lack of readily available information on forests, some of the solutions that we've designed at Global Forest Watch to overcome this challenge, and then some of the impact. So what are the use cases? How are people using our data, and how have we seen this make a difference in the world? A little bit of background, hopefully everyone is aware, but we're facing a bit of a crisis in terms of losing forested habitats around the world. According to our latest data, we're losing them at a rate of around 50 soccer fields per minute, which is equivalent to around 2.3 million square kilometers in the last 13 years. This matters for any number of reasons, but one of the most globally relevant reasons is, of course, climate change. Greenhouse gas emissions from deforestation contribute to around 15% of anthropogenic emissions. And if we care about combating climate change, preserving forests and restoring forests is one of the most cost-effective ways to reduce anthropogenic emissions. So truly, we need to have the best available information to make these decisions and halt climate change. But despite the urgency of this issue, before a few years ago, we knew surprisingly little about forests. There was a lot of amazing work being done, particularly in the academy, but often this work was published in papers that were behind a paywall in an academic journal, or they were scattered across different formats, or these algorithms and analyses were run once and were never operationalized into the future. And so this was really the inspiration of Global Forest Watch, was thinking, well, how can we take all of this information scattered across different formats in different silos and bring it together in one place? And we are really inspired by, for example, you can take the financial sector, in which anyone can go online, even if you're a CEO of a Fortune 500 company or an individual just managing your finances, and see in real time valuable information to help you make decisions. And despite the overwhelming complexity of the underlying information, it's displayed in a way that is relatively simple and easy to understand. So being quite ambitious and naive, this was our inspiration behind Global Forest Watch, was how can we take troves of very complex information on forests and forest change, forest status, from many different sources, from NGOs, governments, and academia, and provide it into the public in a way that is free, easy to use, interactive, and timely. Basically, how can we connect users at a range of different scales to the information that matters to them most? So we created the Global Forest Watch platform. We launched it in 2014, and unfortunately I won't demo the full capability of the platform today, but I strongly encourage you to go online and poke around it in your own time. But since we launched in 2014, we've had over 1 million visitors from literally every single country in the world. We've had some very engaged users, including national governments of Peru, Uganda, Liberia, Madagascar, Georgia, Mexico, and many other countries. We've seen massive uptake among civil society, folks like Greenpeace who use our data to strengthen their campaigns. And we've also seen our data used by journalists and academics around the world. Companies now using our data to look at deforestation in their supply chain, including Unilever, Cargill, Nestle, Wilmar, and many others. So I strongly encourage you to go visit the platform. We're constantly improving it in an iterative way by getting feedback from our users, but unfortunately I won't show you the full capability of the platform today. Global Forest Watch would not be possible without the broad range of partners we have in this network. Although GFW is convened by the World Resources Institute, fundamentally we are a partnership, a growing partnership of over 90 organizations, and those organizations include tech companies like Goodall and Esri who provide computing power and help us solve visualization challenges with big data. They include data providers such as University of Maryland, Matt Hansen, who spoke yesterday, Amazon, and many others who are running global forest detection algorithms on Earth observation data, as well as users of that data, so companies and governments, UN agencies, and many other who use our data for decision making. Also, fundamentally, Global Forest Watch would not be possible without the open data policy that really caused a sea change in Earth observation research in 2008 when the US Geological Society made the then 3.6 million images acquired by Landsat freely available. And then you had groups like Goodall taking those data and maintaining vast forests of servers that made it more easy than ever to go and access and analyze this information. And so really this provided us unprecedented ability in how we analyze the Earth's resources. And most notably, it made possible this analysis, which I'm sure Matt spoke about yesterday, which was one of the cornerstone data sets for Global Forest Watch when we launched. So what you're looking at right now is a global analysis of tree cover loss, which was produced by University of Maryland, Goodall, and others, and this was incredibly unprecedented. It was the first ever globally consistent but locally relevant analysis of tree cover change. Never before had we imposed a singular biophysical definition of tree cover loss across the world that allowed us to look at, how countries were performing side by side, but then also how they were performing within their boundaries. And so on Global Forest Watch, what we did is we took this data and we made it interactive. So as you can see, it's cycling through on a time slider below, but there's also a number of other functionalities that we enabled for users that made it easier to interact with the data. For example, you can draw a polygon and get on-the-fly statistics about tree cover loss in that area. You can upload shapefiles to get on-the-fly statistics about those areas. You can choose a specific jurisdiction, such as a country or a subnational jurisdiction, and get all of these statistics on the fly. And for all of you who know GIS software or who have manipulated raster data before, this is a pretty significant efficiency gain in terms of being able to quickly get these statistics on the fly without having to download the data, import it into a software, and do this analysis locally on your computer. One important point I like to emphasize is that not all of Global Forest Watch's data is from satellites. It's not all Earth observation based. We have over 170 data sets total in our system, and actually the majority of these data sets are contextual ancillary data sets on things like, for example, what you're seeing here, which are indigenous lands in Brazil. But we've worked very hard to build relationships with governments, civil society, and companies to get access to things like the boundaries of oil palm concessions, the boundaries of logging concessions, the boundaries of mining concessions, global protected areas, indigenous lands, the boundaries of primary forests. So we have more and more ancillary data that can help answer the question of why is this change happening, and what potentially is the impact of this change on things like emissions and biodiversity. So fundamentally, we don't just include remotely sensed data, but a number of ancillary data sets that can help you understand things like how effective are indigenous territories in the Amazon at reducing deforestation. Ever since we launched, we've been using this term near real time, when in reality, many of our data sets weren't taking advantage of the periodicity of many of the Earth observation satellites in orbit currently. When we launched Global Forest Watch, for example, one of the most frequently updated forest loss detection systems we had is what you see on the left there. It was based on MODIS, and it was produced monthly. So if you can imagine, we had many forest rangers coming to us, people working in law enforcement in the field, and they said, well, your annual data is great because it's 30 meters, but it's not updated frequently enough. And then you have this monthly system, but it's 500 meters, so it doesn't provide the granularity that's necessary in a dense forest for us to really target potential illegal activities. And so since we've heard this over and over and again from our users that they would like more frequent early warning systems, we recently launched something we're very excited about on the right called the GLAD Alerts, together with Matt Hansen and his team at the University of Maryland. So effectively what this does is enable us to, every time there's a Landsat pass, every 8 days, run an algorithm that looks for potential forest loss and then show alerts every 8 days. And currently we have this for Brazil, Peru, Uganda, Republic of Congo, Kalimantan, the Russian Far East. I'm probably missing one, Matt, but we hope to have this for the major forested basins very, very soon. And as you can see, this represents a significant gain in spatial resolution. So as opposed to 500 meters, we're down to 30 meters, and also temporal resolution. So once we had monthly alerts, now we have them every 8 days. And we've seen incredible uptake of this system for law enforcement purposes. So for example, this is showing in blue a buffer zone of a protected area in Peru. And then you'll see as it cycles through, the GLAD alerts there detecting a road. And we have a partnership with OCIN4, which is the Independent Forest Oversight Agency in Peru, as well as the Ministry of Environment in Peru. And they're currently using this system to prioritize their verification efforts. In this particular case, they actually did a flyover of this area and further reconnaissance and actually found timber of questionable origins being transported along these roads. And so we've gotten feedback that really this is an incredibly valuable resource to help these law enforcement agencies prioritize where to invest their resources and where to do these flyover or reconnaissance missions. Of course, one challenge with this system currently is that it's based principally on optical data. So this is built on the Landsat satellite. We are incredibly excited about the Copernicus program, and in particular Sentinel-1, and the new streams of operational radar data that we'll have for free for the first time. And so we're very excited to start experimenting with research questions around multi-sensor approaches to these early warning systems, and if we can, in a way, incorporate radar or other sensors into these systems to get a more complete picture and not have to deal with the persistent cloud coverage of many parts of the tropics. So another use case of our data, as I mentioned, is really this sort of field-based reconnaissance missions. And early in our development, we were approached by the Jane Goodall Institute, who said, we love your data. We use it in our headquarters in DC to look at chimpanzee habitat and health and the way that forest loss impacts chimpanzee habitat. But we have hundreds of people in the field in Africa who are regularly doing patrols, actually monitoring these habitats actively, and they don't have the internet access that would be required for them to access your data. It seems like a pretty big issue for GFW, given that we're trying to actually influence forest management on the ground. So together with the Jane Goodall Institute and Google and a few other partners, we started building a mobile device, a mobile software that allows users to cache relevant data from Global Forest Watch so they can select their area of concern, say a national park in Uganda, and then it caches all the relevant recent forest loss information and satellite data so that when you're offline in the field doing your patrol, you know the most high priority areas to navigate to. So as you can see, this is kind of what it looks like. It's a very simple interface. What you're looking at is lost pixels, and it'll actually navigate you to those areas with the go-to functions, show you the lat-long coordinates, and then ultimately allow you to collect information on what you're seeing. It's currently built on ODK, which is an open source data collection software, but we're looking to improve the functionality and the ease of use into the future. And so we've started piloting this application with the Jane Goodall Institute and their program areas across Africa. And this is one training that I was very fortunate to attend in Chibale National Park in Uganda, which has the highest propensity has the highest ape population of anywhere in Africa, actually. And what we heard from the rangers there is that with our data and with Forest Watcher, the mobile application, it really allowed them to have more intelligence-led patrols. Because in the past, many of the rangers would stick to the same footpaths without really, an awareness of areas of potential change that they might want to go investigate. And so this is actively being used in Chibale National Park and a number of other national parks in Africa. One use case we were actually kind of surprised about is the uptake of our data by journalists. GFW is a completely open platform. It's free. All of our data is downloadable, so inherently anyone can use it. And what I'm looping through now is an area of forest loss that we detected deep in the Peruvian Amazon near Iquitos. And it came to light that this particular pattern you're seeing is clearing for a cacao plantation. Not only was it clearing for a cacao plantation, but it was cleared by a company who claimed to have sustainable practices and had committed to a zero deforestation policy. And when this came to light and people saw on Global Forest Watch that this was happening, there were stories published in Business Insider and the Washington Post to try to shed light on the fact that this company was operating in clear violation of their policies. And thus began a movement by a number of environmental organizations to delist them from the London Stock Exchange. So there's actually an ongoing case now to get them delisted from the London Stock Exchange. There was a successful case to remove them from a smaller social stock exchange based on the violation of their policy. But fundamentally, this has been really exciting for us because we see journalists as being an incredible voice that can apply pressure to other actors, such as governments and companies, to improve their practices around sustainability and forest management. So we're hoping to amplify, to the extent that we can, this type of data-based journalism that can shed light on things that might have happened out of sight and out of mind in the past. So since we launched 2 years ago, we've also had the realization that there are particular use cases that require a little bit more context and data and functionality to fully understand. And so I'll talk about 2 of the additional websites we've built to get at these particular use cases. One major use case has been commodity buyers, traders, and suppliers who are very interested in looking at deforestation across their supply chain. You may be unaware that 4 commodities produced in just 8 countries are responsible for around a third of forest loss in the tropics. So really a large driver are things like oil palm, beef, soy, timber. And if we can address, the supply chain of those companies, hopefully we can make a significant contribution to reducing deforestation. And the good news is that many companies are committing to zero deforestation commitments. So this began in 2011 with Nestle being kind of the early mover, saying, we're going to commit to zero deforestation our supply chain. And since then, many companies have followed, with around 60% of the palm oil trade now falling under one of these certification or commitment programs, rather. And this is incredibly exciting, but the frustrating part is most of these companies have absolutely no clue how to implement these policies. And so they're coming to us, saying, well, what kind of data do you have? How can we apply this across our supply chain to look for things like risk, to know who we should exclude, who we should perhaps invest a little bit more attention in. And so we've been building specialized tools that package many different data layers from Global Forest Watch to try to get at risk within supply chains. One recent tool that we just published is a mill risk assessment. So in the context of palm oil, many companies are now working to trace back their supply chain to the individual mill level. But previously, these mill points were not made publicly available. So these were not areas that were divulged publicly by companies. And so this is in honor of Global Forest Watch's sort of open data ethos. We worked with these companies to anonymize their databases of mill points and make them publicly available through Global Forest Watch. So we now have the first ever publicly facing database of mill points. We're currently around 800, and that number is growing. And we did that so that we could also make publicly available this mill risk algorithm that basically looks at a number of environmental values around that particular mill point, including does it fall in a legally protected area, does it fall in a primary forest, does it fall in peatland, what is the carbon density of that particular area, and then it also looks at threats. So what is the historical rate of tree cover loss? What are the historical fire activity in that area? And basically what the output looks like is something like this that easily allows a company to prioritize particular mills and understand areas in their supply chain that might represent some kind of risk to the company if they are hoping to comply with a zero deforestation commitment. Another tool we've been building along the same lines is called Global Forest Watch Finance. It's not publicly available yet, but we are currently in the process of interviewing many different development and finance banks about what they would like to see in this particular tool. In the process of building GFW commodities and working with companies like Unilever and Nestle and Wilmar, we also were contacted by a number of banks that said, well, we have portfolios and we actually have zero deforestation policies on the books, and we don't know how to assess that systematically across our investment portfolios. So can you build a tool for us that packages your data to help us understand potential risks in our investment portfolios? So the resulting product looks something like this currently, and effectively what it is a risk screening tool that is not map-based per se, because many of these banks, they don't want to look at a map, they don't want to look at the raw data, they want to have packaged insights and analysis like that's actually relevant to their portfolio. And so the resultant risk screen focuses on delivering these analytics and these dashboards that financial analysts, risk officers, and portfolio managers need to understand deforestation and related social and environmental risk in their portfolios. So as I said, this is something that's currently under development, and we're interviewing many different users who've requested this, and we've received a lot of positive feedback, both from development banks and investment banks, about the utility of a system like this to actually understanding potential risks across portfolios. So when I think about sort of the future of Global Forest Watch and where we're headed, there are a few things that really excite me. Firstly is this golden age of Earth observation that we're currently living in. NASA missions, Landsat clearly, along with the planned JEDI and biomass missions, will represent unprecedented ability for us to understand forest dynamics, terrestrial carbon dynamics, as well as, of course, the Copernicus program of the Environmental Space Agency and European Space Agency in Europe represent an incredible trove of information that we're just sitting here hoping to get our hands on and transform into valuable information for people who want to manage forests better. Secondly, and relatedly, are new partners that we're leveraging to better understand this information. So we're increasingly bringing in more and more research partners, including some innovative Silicon Valley companies hoping to work with artificial intelligence techniques, deep convolutional neural nets, and machine vision to efficiently make use of these new streams of information. And ultimately, that means for us that new insights are possible. There are clearly many limitations to the data we currently have, but ultimately they represent the best we can do with the data streams we have available and the computational techniques that we currently have operational. But I anticipate that this will change and Global Forest Watch will look very different even just 2 to 3 years from now. So that's all I have, and feel free to ask questions. Thanks so much.